Hello, we are live. Is anybody here? Noon. Hi, nice to have you here. Ready for some MCP fun? Have you tried out MCP yet, Noon? Are you using anything like Copilot or Cursor, Windsurf, anything like that? Not yet. All right. Let's give just another minute or so for people to jump in. And then we'll take off. So the stream should take about, 45 minutes or so. Just a bit of context. I started working on MCP server for a project that I work on called Less. It's infrastructure from Code Tool. Was pretty much ready to get it pushed to production, and decided that I would make a live video and kind of start over, go through the process. It's a pretty straightforward process. There's a lot of hype about MCP everywhere that we go, LLMs and things like that. Some people are for it, some people are against it, some people think it's the future, some people think it'll never replace humans. I think a lot of things that are repetitive tasks, as with any other automation tool, I think it's MCP is a really good candidate for it. I'm really glad that they that Anthropic released the protocol. I work a lot with JSON schema, JSON hyperschema to be able to let clients navigate my projects, and I was actually thinking about integrating with MCP, giving LLMs a way to communicate with my tools by leveraging what I already had in place, which is basically JSON hyperschemas, and letting it, learn how to navigate the links. I think it would be able to do that pretty well, but I think the MCP protocol makes it a lot better, and with it becoming the industry standard, you already have a lot of clients that are already integrated with it, so I think it fits pretty well. With that said, let's kick it off. Let me turn on video. Where's the video? Here we go. All right. Hello everybody, once again, I am Nilsson. I will be your host today. So what did we promise? So we said we're gonna be vibe coding an MCP server together. So I use a tool called Less. I'm not gonna do like a lot of advertising of that right now. If you are interested, you can I'll pull up the link in a minute. You can check it out. If you do enjoy it, I appreciate your support. But that's not the point today. Today we're gonna focus on building MCP server. As I was just mentioning, for those who had not yet joined, I was pretty much ready to push this to production, and decided that with a lot of people kind of confused and not really knowing what's possible, how to get it done, I decided to do this live. It's my first time doing a live, so forgive me for the stuttering or for any disorganization, or if the video drops or latency or anything like that, but we'll hope for the best. So I decided that I wanted to create an MCP server for my Less tool, which is an infrastructure from Code tool that automates cloud infrastructure, specifically on AWS at the moment. And they're pretty straightforward, but I think when I get to places where I want to create a new route or a new WebSocket or a topic or anything like that, and going back to the CLI, and I use Copilot in my day-to-day. and it's really kind of taken off with really speeds up my development. So I've been using it for a few months now, and then the vibe coding term started being thrown around, and I was like, oh hey, I think I've been vibe coding for a while now. I didn't know there was a name for it, so I don't know what the specific term is, what the definition is, but to me, I mean, the way that I'd say quote unquote vibe code is that I write a lot of I write comments, so I just write code comments and then hit enter, and then Copilot is able to infer what I want to do based on the comment, and more often than not, it's correct in what it's doing. So it's not like I'm writing a prompt and letting it write an entire application for me, although I have done that with new projects. Nothing that's been pushed to production, but I have done that with new projects, and the tools just keep getting better and better. So I think we're going to do a couple things here. We're going to one, learn a bit about MCP, build an MCP server, integrate it with VSCode, and then just to see that how it works in other tools, we'll throw it into Windsurf as well. And then once we have all that set up, I'll show you guys some pretty cool tips and tricks that I've kind of picked up along the way with my quote unquote vibe coding that allow me to, there's a lot of cool tricks, like you can set up a folder in .github and then Copilot instructions, and it's just a markdown file. And I think a lot of times senior engineers are bashing LLMs because they don't really know what they're doing. I don't agree with that, in the sense that I provide a lot of context, so I know what I want from the tool. And then in VS Code, at least, there is the Copilot Instructions MD that you can set up, and I think it's pretty much like a README I use it as a README basically to communicate what the best practices are, how to structure your files, when you should be considering refactoring. So maybe if you have a function in a file and it's only being used in that file, then that's fine. But if you need to reuse it somewhere else, then let the LLM know that it should pull that into a separate file and then import it, et cetera, et cetera. How to structure comments, how to write schemas. So I use TypeScript. If I'm using TypeScript, I'm using Zod now, and just letting it know that if I'm creating a schema or interface that especially if outsiders can communicate with, like an API route, or when we're building the MCP server, we'll see that the LLM is communicating with, then I'll use Zod, and so I'll just throw all that inside of the Copilot instructions instead of giving it context and copy pasting all the time, which is what I used to do before I knew it was a possibility. So yeah, we'll look at all that, and let's jump right into it. Let me pull up the chat just in case. Akira, thank you for joining us. I'll be monitoring the chat, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in there, and I'll answer for you. If there's anything specific that you want me to go over, let me know. If I'm going too fast, let me know, et cetera, et cetera. So a bit of feedback that you guys could give me, I'd appreciate, is how is the stream quality so far? I can adjust it if necessary. So yeah, let's do it. So ready to supercharge your AI workflows. We're going to be doing our live coding session, quote unquote vibe coding. I don't know what that means specifically, but when the LLM and Copilot is kind of walking me through things, I guess we can just call that vibe coding. So at the end of the session, we'll have a fully functioning MCP server that we can integrate with tools like VS Code, Windsurf, or any other MCP client. So we're going to be building an MCP server. However, you can, I think with the what you're going to gather from here, you'll be able to turn around and build an MCP client as well if you want to. Maybe I'll do another video depending on how this one goes, depending on your feedback. So let me know if you do want to see that. So what is MCP? I'll go straight into the Anthropic site for the MCP documentation, and we'll look at it from here. So MCP is an open protocol that standardizes how applications provide context to LLMs. Essentially an interface. So when you look at something like a REST API, it's a standardized protocol that we all use. We all understand what get means, what post means. We know what should go in the body. We know what should go in the query parameters. And that's humans interacting with the protocol and dealing with it that way. You want to use a CLI tool. You'll probably do something like, I don't know, -- help on whatever tool that you're using, and it'll show you what the interface is. And then we know as humans how to deal with that CLI tool and interact with it and use the tool. So MCP is basically the same thing. So MCP allows an LLM to understand what tools are available, how to use them, and at the end of the day, interact with whatever service is underneath the MCP. So as I mentioned, we'll be creating a CLI tool. We'll be pushing it to production. We'll be wrapping a CLI tool, pushing it to production. So it's going to be an MCP tool that wraps a CLI tool. We'll be following the documentation here, following the quick start guide. You can see it on the left-hand panel, which we're going to set up a TypeScript project. Initially, it's going to be wrapping just a REST API, right? So what's MCP? We can kind of cut the bullshit and say MCP is just a wrapper for a REST API or a CLI tool. Don't crucify me if you have a different definition for it, but more or less that's what it is. So it makes it super easy. I already have a CLI tool, so you'll see how easy and how fast it is to get an MCP wrapped around that and kind of take off. So yeah, think of it like a USB-C port for AI applications. Just USB-C provides a standardized way to blah, 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 blah. Yeah, fuck all that. It's a wrapper for a REST API or CLI tool, essentially. So we can kind of go over this really quickly, but I think we all understand how kind of client-server architecture kind of works. So we're going to be creating an MCP server, and then there are clients, and those are MCP clients. Just like you have a REST API, which has a server, and then like Postman is a client, or your browser is a client, or whatever other client you may have, right? So it's just a kind of client-server type of architecture, as I mentioned right here. And then, there are a lot of things in the documentation that, in my experience, do not coincide with reality. So I'll point those out as we go. I think it's something that's just kind of moving really fast. So I think there's kind of documentation that's outdated. There are kind of tips that are pointed out in different articles that I've read, or even in the documentation here, which is the official documentation, that doesn't quite click. So I'll point those out as we go. So we mentioned here local data sources they call them resources. So that might be something static. It says here computer files, databases. In my experience, those don't actually work. I think it depends on the client that you're dealing with, but not all clients implement not all clients are using the MCP protocol correctly. And so, again, we'll get into that in a second. Let me get right into the quick start guide. So quick start for server developers. Let's click here. A bit of an overview. So let's build our own server to use in Claude for desktop and other clients. I'm a VSCode guy, so I'll be sticking to VSCode. In this tutorial, we'll build a simple MCP weather server and connect it to a host, Claude for desktop. Once again, if you want to use Claude, go for it. That's fine. You should be able to figure that out. It's just a matter of just connecting it. So what are we building? Many LLMs don't currently have the ability to fetch forecasts and serve weather alerts. Let's use MCP to solve that. So we're going to build a server that exposes two tools: get alerts, so to get weather alerts, and then get forecast. And then we'll connect it to the host, in this case Claude for desktop. Again, we're going to be doing VS Code. Boom, 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 boom. Core MCP concepts. So this is a big one. Resources, file-like data that can be read by clients, like API responses or file contents. Tools are functions that can be called by the LLM. And then it says here with user approval. And then prompts are pre-written templates that help users accomplish specific tasks. The way I read this is a resource is basically a GET request, more or less. You're fetching data. Tools are, post patch, whatever, even a delete. So it is manipulating data based on your input, and then prompts are templates that I don't know what they're supposed to do. So we all know what a prompt is with the AI, but in my experience, I have not been able to get those to work for the life of me. So you know, it's what is documented: resources, tools, and prompts. In reality, we're only going to be using tools, even for things that you might call a resource. So if you're doing a get, we'll just be using tools for that as well, because again, in my experience, the resources don't work. Let's jump into Node. I mentioned in the event page on Luma that you should be, you know, fairly acquainted with TypeScript. If you're not, the general concepts will, you know, if you know how to code, you should be able to follow along anyways. So hopefully your environment is set up, and then let's jump right into it. So do I have VS Code? Yes, I do. So I have an empty project here, so we'll be starting from 0. Make dir weather, cd weather. I'm not gonna call it that. I have less MCP is the name of my directory, so I'll jump into here. ls, it's empty, so we'll do npm init y, and there we go. We got our package JSON. All right, and then so that we're ready to deploy to production, I'll call this less ifc/MCP. Let's do it like that. All right, and then we'll call it 001 when we deploy. All right, cool. So let's install our dependencies. So the first one is the MCP protocol SDK, and we're going to be using Zod for our schemas. And then as a dev dependencies, we'll set up our node types and then TypeScript. So I can copy this, dump it in my terminal, come back while it's working, copy this one, it's still working. All right, next. There we go. All right, I'm gonna need a source. There we go, and then I'm gonna touch the index.ts. All right, there we go. All right, and then a few other things we need to set up in our package JSON. So we're gonna set the type to module, bin, scripts, and files. So let me copy all this, get that out of the way, and I'll dump this here. I have scripts twice now, so let me get rid of this one. All right, and then instead of weather, I'm gonna call it less. That's gonna be in the build folder, and then I have my TypeScript chmod for my build. Is that all right? Yes, that looks right. All right, cool. All right. And then finally the ts config. So let me copy this, ts config JSON, and we will touch the ts config. Here we go. Copy and paste. There we go. All right. All right, so let's build our server. It's gonna be a lot of copy paste. I will take it step by step and show you guys what's going on as we go through the motions. So let me go into my source, paste this, and what we'll see here is that we are importing the MCP server SDK here. SDIO server transport, we'll see this once we actually run the server, and then we have Zod for our schemas. Couple environment variables here. I'll show you guys how to set those up properly in a minute. And then we have our server. So we're starting off creating our server. I'm gonna rename it to less. So this might, whoops. There we go. All right. And then we said it was 001. It's probably not the best way to set up my versioning, because I'm gonna have to jump back and forth between package JSON to maintain that. So, but that's a problem for another day. Okay. So there, we have our server. It's not doing anything yet. As you can see, it's not being used yet. So let's take the next step. So what's all this? So helper function for making, what is it called? NWS? I don't even know what NWS is, but essentially the weather forecast thingy. So we have a function that is using fetch to communicate with, where is it? So we have the URL. Okay. Yep. So we're just making, we just have this set up to be able to make GET requests at the weather forecast API. This is what a weather alert looks like. So it has events, area description, severity, etc. Okay, so that's just our interface. Format alert. So this is essentially, will allow us to take the response, format it how we want, separate the line, and then, join on that at the end. Forecast period, whatever, just another interface. Alerts response, another interface, so it's just an array of alerts. And then points response, don't know what points are, don't really care, doesn't really matter at this point. Next, forecast response. All right, so we're just setting up our interfaces, right? Really nothing interesting. So these are just the helper functions. Next, implementing the tool execution. So this is where we're gonna really get into it now. Okay, so let me close all of this, and then we can just focus on what matters, which is how the MCP actually works. Okay, so a few things we'll see here. So our server has a tool. We mentioned tools are things that are used to interact with the underlying service. From what I understand from all the documentation that I've read, this should not be a tool, this should be a resource. However, as I mentioned, in the different MCP clients that I've used, I haven't seen resources working except in the MCP inspector, which is also built by Anthropic. We'll get into that in a second. I'll show you guys how that works when we get into debugging. Okay, so first we have the name of the tool. Let me see if I can inspect right here. So first we have the name, then we have a description, and then we have the schema, right? So this is the name of what's going to be executed. There's really nothing interesting about that. Now, so let me jump back for a second. We mentioned resources. I had also mentioned that there are prompts. So if you go back to the documentation, early on in the documentation, there was a section that talked about prompts. What I see essentially the way to actually give the MCP client context is by the description here. So this is one way. So if I say fetch the weather, it's able to understand that this is the tool that it should use. So what's a tool? Get alerts is a tool, okay? And then when I say get the weather, fetch the weather, what's the weather look like, or anything like that, the LLM is able to understand that. It'll look through my tools and it can figure out that this is the one that it should use. So the longer the description, the better. Don't overdo it to not overwhelm the server or the client in this case. But this is the way that I see, this is the best way that I see to give the client context. And then you have your individual parameters, right? So if you're using Zod, which in this case we are, this also gives the MCP client a lot of context, okay? So it understands, for example, it should be a 2-letter state code and not California, for example, right? And then what are we doing? So we're gonna take the state, which is a string, and convert it to uppercase. This must be, right? And then this is being used as a query param. I'm guessing that the API requires it as uppercase. Doesn't really make sense, but let's just pretend that that's the case. So right here, we're converting it to uppercase to be able to pass it to the REST API, right? And then this is our response. So we make our request with the URL, and this is our response. And it's gonna map it, so it uses the type here to map it and give it to me as I expect. If there's no data, then this is the response here that we're giving to the client, okay? And then here, in the case of, okay, so this case, there's nothing to return, so we're giving a response here once again, nothing really interesting here. And then finally, in the case that there is success, we map over the responses, alerts, text, active alerts for blah, 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 formatted, and then we give that back to the MCP client, right? So, and then one more that we have here is another server tool. So get forecast. So if I say, what's the forecast for whatever, right? Based on the latitude and longitude, which I don't know the latitude and longitude for where I am now, but LLM is able to figure that out, right? So it takes a pretty poor interface for a human and makes it a pleasant interface when I'm interacting with it via the LLM instead, right? So I don't have to deal with latitude and longitude. Imagine I say to the LLM, what's the latitude and longitude for New York, New York? It'll be able to figure that out for me, right? So this is where it kind of, you know, works in conjunction with human and the prompts and everything to give you what you need. So once again, we have our schema. If I say, you know, give me the forecast, give me the weather, whatever way that you want to word that, you might even be able to say it in different languages and it should be able to figure it out. And then here, so this is context for the tool, and then these are contexts for each of the parameters, right? So I take the latitude and longitude, construct my URL. So the latitude, I don't know how the LLM would want to give it to me, but here we convert it to fixed for decimal points. Longitude, we're doing the same thing, right? So we're not in the LLM anymore. You guys can see how simple that is. So let's take it from the top. I created my server, and then, you know, I set up my tool, I gave it a name and a description, and I have a schema, you know, nothing new. And then this is just a REST API. I'm just interacting with it with an API route, right? And I return this object, right? So I have an object with content, and it's just an array of content. Type is text. I haven't had a reason to have anything other than one object inside of the content, so it's always an array of size 1. And then here's the same thing, right? Really nothing special. So, you know, it's all your standard stuff, formatted forecast, you know, nothing special at all. I think people try to make things a bit more complicated than they actually are. All right, so let's get it working. Running the server. Finally, implement the main function to run the server. So if we were building a REST API, it would have been kind of the same thing, right? So function name, main, the transport is going to be stdio server transport. There are other types of transports. Don't recall them off the top of my head, but this is just using standard input, standard output. Server connect using the transport, console error. We'll get into errors because according to the documentation, we should not be logging anything to standard error. However, console error does log to standard error, which is a bit of a contradiction, but you know, it's their docs and it actually does work, so this is fine. And in case anything fails in main, then we exit the process. So again, super simple. We're up here, we set up our server, we set up our tool, which is basically, you know, the name of the tool, description, schema, and then we do whatever we want inside of that. So I said it in the beginning, you know, it's just a wrapper for a CLI tool or for a REST API. I mean, you don't have to build a REST API at all if you don't want to. I mean, you just, you know, however it is that you would structure kind of like MVC in a REST API, you can do the same thing here. So that's it. And we know how to build and run, but let me see here. npm run build to build the server, and then we're going to test it in Claude according to them, which is not what we're going to do. We'll do this in VS Code. So we'll test it here in place. So npm run build. All right, so I have my build here. Whoops, got my build here, JavaScript. And then how do we do this? So I'm going to get into my Copilot chat. Let me clean up. I was testing this before jumping in. I'm in agent mode. So if you are in ask or edit mode, you're not going to see the tool icon here. You have to be in agent mode, which is basically your MCP client, right? And then GitHub Copilot gives me all of these tools. I don't want to use these tools right now. I want to use a new tool. Add an MCP server here. However, this is going to ask me to set it up via like NPM or HTTP. Because we're in development, I'm going to hit Command-Shift-P in VS Code, and I'm going to go to my user settings. Okay? And let me close this guy. And I have my servers here. MCP servers. Okay? And then I can essentially just copy this because this is going to work the same way. All right, so we'll leave it as weather. Actually, let me just call it less now. Okay. It's going to run node, and then these are the args. So node, and then the path, the JSON file. So let me come in here. We want to use the build, copy path, and I'll replace this. Okay. And then there we go. Now it's giving me the start option here. So let me open up my chat once again. The tool's not here yet. Oh, why did it do that? Build. That's weird. That's weird. It's like cached or something. Looks like it's cached. Can I reset? Where's the reset? I know there used to be a reset button. This thing is changing all the time. Doesn't matter. So let's run start here and go back here, and we should see our MCP server for less, basically weather, right? So these are the two tools, as they call them, essentially actions. So I can toggle them on and off, or I can leave them all running. And then let's say, what's the weather like? What's the weather like in Miami, Florida? All right. I'll check the current weather forecast for Miami, Florida for you. Let me get that information right away. So the client is thinking, and then so check this out. So this is where LLMs really shine. So it wants to run the get forecast action, the get forecast, what's the proper term, tool in the less MCP server, okay? And then you can see the description here. This is the description that we provided, get weather forecast for a location. And then be very, very careful here, guys. Very, very careful. This is gonna be a huge security vulnerability if you just go around installing servers willy-nilly. They do have access to your machine. They have access to execute commands. In this case, I don't know what's actually happening because I don't see the implementation. I mean, we just wrote it, but if you're using someone else's tool, you have no idea what they're gonna actually do. And we'll see a bit of that, why it's so sensitive when we work with the CLI, because you know, I can run anything essentially on your machine. I don't know what see more will tell me. Yeah, so be careful installing tools. And then I can say allow in this session, allow in this workspace, always allow. So I'll hit continue, and again we can see that, you know, it was able to figure out the latitude and longitude for Miami, Florida, which is nice. And then I'll hit continue, and it's just running my function at this point, right? So it's basically making a get request, it'll get the response, parse the response, and then throw it back at me. And because it's an LLM, it's not necessarily gonna give me the output as I formatted it. So let's say the response was JSON, it's not necessarily gonna give me JSON back. So it'll format it intelligently. You know, if you have like timestamps and things like that, it'll format the date and time for you properly, which is really, really nice. So that's it. Currently the weather in Miami, Florida is, you know, today 84 degrees Fahrenheit, you know, 73 Celsius, and I'll say like, I said Celsius. I think I was kind of thinking ahead. Give it to me in Celsius. Give it a minute. It's taking a while. There we go. So we'll notice that this time it didn't prompt me again to give it authorization. That's because it did not make the GET request a second time. It's working within this context window. So it just converted it based on the context that it already had. If I were to start over and I say, give me the weather in Miami, Florida in Celsius. Then it'll ask me if it can run the thingy, and then I have to authorize it, and then it'll do its thing. So we have get forecast. I think you guys kind of get it at this point. We don't really have to run all of the tools. So yeah, we have our server running. Let's go back to the docs here. And the same way that I set this up here, I could have set this up in Windsurf. If you guys, mention in the chat if you want me to pivot into Windsurf and show you guys how to set it up there. It's just more of the same though, essentially. I think instead of server and then inside of server, so basically like, I think it's MCP actually, MCP.servers. I think in Windsurf it's just camel case, like MCP server or something like that. And then actually if you look here, it's MCP servers. So I think in Windsurf it's MCP server, singular. I'm not sure off the top of my head. So each client is going to be different, but they're all doing essentially the same thing. Boom, 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 boom. And yeah, we just mentioned all this, what's happening under the hood. So the client sends your question to Claude. So it's sending your question to Copilot in our case. Copilot will analyze, or let's say the LLM will analyze the tools and decide which one to use. And then the client will execute the tool. So in this case, Copilot will execute the tool. It goes back to the LLM. It'll format it however it decides, or if you give it context how you want it formatted, it'll do what you want, and then it gives you the response. So which one did we do? We said what is the weather? Which one is weather? That's alerts. This one's weather, and then where is the response? So forecast, which is just a string. Yeah, I want to show you guys what the output looked like, but I don't think it really matters anyway. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. So what else can we do? What else can we do? How do we, let's see what this shows us. Concepts. So I think I might want to go to the TypeScript SDK. Let's see where this takes us. So we have tools. We've looked at that already. We have resources. Actually, let's do this. Let's look at how to debug this guy. And then I'll show you guys what I told you should work but doesn't. So let me show you it working and then show you it not working in VS Code. But again, I think you should be able to get by with using just tools at this point. Debugging. Comprehensive guide to debugging MCP, debugging tools overview. So there is an MCP inspector. There are Claude desktop developer tools. I know Anthropic wants to push Claude, but I don't want to get into anything specific. I mean, these things work anywhere. So because this is very specific to Claude, I'm going to step over it for right now. So instead of debugging in Claude, we'll just look at the inspector, which is here. So we can use a NPX model context protocol inspector and just run the command to basically run the server, right? So let me copy this. I'll go back into back into package JSON. I'll set up a new script and I'll call it inspect. All right, cool. And how do we run this? So it's going to be node and then build index.js. There we go. All right. So that's vibe coding for me, right? It's not really quite autocomplete. It's more context for Copilot and then just kind of tap, 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 tap. We'll see that a little bit more when we do the CLI, since we're not doing so much copy paste we'll see what it what things actually look like when you implement them. All right, so back to the terminal. Let me close this a little bit because it gives you too much information about my machine. But I will say npm run inspect. All right. Yes, do your thing. Still in 0.0.12, so hopefully it's not like React that goes to like 0.2000 and we get to a major version eventually. All right, so let's, oh, that gave me in the wrong window, hold on. All right, and I'll just run connect. So in the same way that we set up VS Code to connect to our server, we're now, so this is just another client, right? The inspector is essentially just another MCP client that is also connecting to our server, okay? If you do make changes, just so these guys don't, so you don't take missteps, when you make changes, you should restart so that your tools are listed properly. So here we go. So list tools. So I'm under tools. I hit list tools. Let me do that again. So I hit list tools, and these are the tools that I have available. So get alerts, get weather alerts for a state. Let me click here, and then get weather alerts for a state, 2-letter state code. So let me say FL. Actually, let's look at get forecast. So here we'll see, based on our schema, right, it's asking me for latitude and longitude. I don't have any memorized, right? So let me go here and do run tool. So again, it's communicating with my server, which is communicating with the weather forecast REST API. Oh my God, it failed. Yep, demo gods. We didn't do a sacrifice before we started. All right, so it worked this time. Cool. Codebox, yo, what's happening? Noon, yes, it is simpler than expected. I think we hear all the mumbo jumbo and everybody kind of talking about these things and just, kind of a lot of people trying to act, seem smarter than they probably are, but it's really not that simple. It's really not that complicated. So active alerts for Florida, blah, 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 blah. I think we kind of get it at this point. So let's go back. So resources is not selectable. Prompts is not selectable. That is because I don't have any running. This is my STD error. So I have a console error running. Once the server gets running, whether MCP server running on SCDIO, if I come back, here, we'll see that right here, right? So this is my console error, letting me know that this is running. Okay, cool. Let me kill it. Gone. All right. And then where are the docs? There we go. Resources. Let's see if there's an example here that I can copy. No. Set request handler, resources. Oh, here we go. Server resource. Add a dynamic resource. Add a dynamic greeting resource. Again, these don't work in VS Code from what I see, but I'll show you guys how to set it up anyways, just so you can see what it looks like. I'm not going to do prompts. It's kind of a bit repetitive. Again, it's not going to work anyways, but I'll just show you guys what the idea is behind it. So I'm importing my resource template. I am setting up, so this is the name of the resource. I'm setting up a new resource template, and this is essentially like the protocol, and then I'm going to pass it a name, and I can use the name to say hello to the name, right? So cool. And let's run inspect one more time, go back to our inspector, restart. Didn't work. Resources should be available now. Why isn't it? Server resource greeting, new resource template. My resources should be available. Let me connect again. That's odd. List tools is working. Resources is not. Server resource greeting, new template. I'm not sure why that is. Oh, I forgot to build. npm run build. And then run inspect again. All right. Yep. So now resources available. List resources or list templates, greeting, enter the name based on the schema, and let's say John Doe. And then read the resource. It's failed. It failed. Oh my God. Why did it fail? Why did it fail? It's making me look bad, guys. I don't know. Let me restart and try again. List templates, greeting, John. I'm not sure why it failed. Let me try. Is it the space? Let me see. Greeting name, hello name. Is it the space? I don't know. I don't know what. Let's try one more time without a space. Or maybe only John works. I'm just kidding. Yep, that doesn't work. Who cares? So let's go back to VS Code. Let's kill the inspector. Let's restart our server here, right? And then we'll go back to our agent with Copilot, and let's inspect the tool once again. So here again, we'll see that we have both of our tools. I don't see the resources anywhere. I have never seen the prompts anywhere. Not sure why they're not integrated, or maybe it's something that I'm missing. If anyone does figure this out, do let me know. But from what I see, it only works inside of the inspector, which is a client, so it should work in any client that implements it. So I guess no clients have it implemented, at least the ones I've used Copilot and Windsurf, and they don't work in any of those. Marcus Brito, well explained for people that don't know the acronyms. LLM, MCP, Google it. I can be Google a little bit. So LLM is large language model. It's a fancy word for AI at this point. I think we use those two words kind of interchangeably. LLM is just a subset of AI, but that's kind of things like ChatGPT, etc. MCP is Model Context Protocol. So the way that I read that is we're giving the AI model context, right, to be able to interface with our tools, and it's just a protocol. So yeah, butchered that, but I think it's kind of good enough. What else we got? So let's get rid of this. Let's get out of this. Let's close this, and let's start over. So this will be quick. I think we've been here for a while. Took a little longer than I was originally had planned, but let me get rid of everything except for the tools. I'll get rid of that tool. I will get rid of the resource, and my tool, I'm gonna call this, so we're gonna get into less now, and I'm gonna call this list projects. Let's continue the same syntax we had before, although it doesn't really make a difference. So list my less projects. All right, and then I need to set up the schema. Oh no, in this case, I don't need to pass it anything. And so here we don't have anything either. Nothing here. Nothing here, nothing here. We're just gonna end up returning. So here we're gonna integrate with a CLI tool. So how do we work with the CLI tool? So let me get rid of this. What do we want to do? So let's start off with something simple. Let's just do like a LS. Let's do a LS to see. I don't even know what directory we're in. I don't know what directory the client is running in. There are some gotchas there, and it's changing every day. So I think VSCode made an update, and so some issues that I was dealing with before I'm not dealing with anymore. But let's just run a simple LS tool. So let's see. Let me see. Let's do something a little more interesting. So in agent mode, I want to say I want to be able, this is the vibe coding part, right? I want to be able to run bash commands in or from in my source index TS. Let's run ls as the first command, and let's see how this guy does. You guys still with me? You bored yet? Well, I guess not if you're still here, unless you fell asleep. All right, I'll help you add functionality to run bash commands to your MCP server starting with the ls command. Let's implement this by adding a tool that can execute bash commands. First, let's examine your package JSON file to understand the dependencies you already have. All right, so it read my package JSON. I hope you didn't add anything there. Now I'll implement functionality to run bash commands in your MCP. For this, we'll use Node's built-in child process to execute shell commands. Let's modify index.ts to add new tools for running bash commands. Let's fix the existing error in the code first and then add our bash command tool. Now let's fix both the existing error and implement our bash command tool. Now let's add our bash command tool. Okay, cool. If it was a junior developer, I'd fire him for saying all that shit. Just like fucking do it. All right, well, that's cool. So on line 4, we import exec from child process. On line 5, we import promisify, and that allows us to do await on our exec. So we have the exec promise. Now let's build and run the server to see if the implementation works. Oh, cool. You're doing a lot. I was using GPT 4.0. I switched to 3.7 Sonnet. It seems a lot smarter. It seems like it reasons a lot better than GPT. I was working on a project the other day and gave it a one-line prompt and asked it to do something really simple that it could have done in essentially just one file, and it ended up touching like 5 different files, fixing some errors that I had. Just did probably 4 hours of work probably would have taken me from a single sentence that I sent it, and it did 4 hours of work in, I don't know, probably 5 minutes, which seems pretty long to be sitting there staring at the screen, but it gave me a ton of context just like it did right now, and it was super helpful. So I think this is where the kind of vibe coding thing kind of comes in. It is helpful though. I know a lot of people talk shit about it, but so cd blah blah blah, I'm not gonna do that. I can figure this out myself from here. So exec promisify, exec promise. Let me see if it did anything else. So list projects, list my less projects. Your less projects will appear here. Text projects list, and then server tool run bash command. Okay, so that makes more sense. So I'll keep what I have, cancel this, and let's see what it did. Use version control, guys, if you're using. So if I had Git set up, I would have probably committed before running the prompt, because it tends to break a lot of shit. So list projects, run bash command. Let me see if I can merge these two. Command the bash command. Oh no, that's bad. You can't just do anything. That's crazy. Oh, that's crazy. Oh, that's cool. So this would have literally done anything. I mentioned before, be careful. Yeah, this is why. I don't know what this is gonna do. Like if I just say like RM, RF, root, it'll fucking blow up my machine. So what I really wanted is this. What I really wanted was to do the exec. So I'm gonna get rid of this. And what's this? Server tool list directory, list files in current directory. Okay, cool. So this was a tool, right? Yeah, so this is a tool that runs bash commands. And then there's another tool specifically that lists files in the current directory. And in this case, yes, it has exec promise ls. Okay, that's exactly what I wanted. I'm capturing SCD out and SCD error. I will give it SCD out if I have that. If I do not, I will give it SCD error. Okay, and so I'll say less MCP server running. Cool. And then yeah, now I can build, which is what it wanted to do anyways, but npm run build. And then let's go back to the tools. Let's check if it reloaded. It did not. I didn't expect it to, but it doesn't hurt to try. So we have to go back to our settings and then restart this one more time. Okay, go back to our agent, and then now I have my list directory here. So try not to overload the client, in this case Copilot, with too many actions available, because then it has to figure out which one you actually meant. Again, this is where the descriptions help, but if you have like conflicting descriptions with something up here and something down here, it's not gonna know which one to use. Again, it's faster than a human, so, but who wants to waste like 5 seconds at a time, 30 seconds at a time, fixing prompts? So the less context you give it, the better. So let me say list the files in my current directory. Maybe this will help us know where we're running from, because I don't know where the server is running from. It used to run from where VSCode was installed, but the last time I tested, it ran from the workspace. I was actually prepared to show you guys how to set it up properly to run in your current workspace, but I'm context switching between projects all the time, so I'm having to go back to my config, set up the workspace, and I have some projects that I use like tmux, and I have like 5 different projects running in the same workspace, and so tmux will, you know, spin up all the projects, open VS Code, put all the projects in my workspace, and then I have to, you know, tell VS Code specifically which project to use, which is annoying. So we're gonna run list directory. Again, I don't know from this context that it's running ls. So again, this is why you have to be careful, because it could have been doing, I'm scared to even type this because I'll fat finger something and and blow up my machine, but it could have done something like that, right? Or it could be like, you know, looping through your files and looking for like all your .envs and then sending it back to their server or whatever. So be very careful with what tools you guys are installing. So I'll run continue. I noticed among the directory there are less related, less basic template demo serverless. I don't know where you got that from. I don't know where you got that from. Whoa! Don't put my business out there, dude. See what I mean? See what I mean? So that's not how it was working not too long ago, but so what I do is here, come back in here, and I'll set up env. Okay, I'll set up env. I hate doing this. I'm sure they'll make it better soon, but, and then I'll say workspace directory, and that will be where am I? Yes, that is where I am, right? Yes. Yes. Okay. That's right, right? Yes. Okay. And then I'll come back here, and instead of doing this, I'll do it this way, which is really annoying, but it is what it is. Because if someone is installing your tool, then you have to give them instructions for how to set it up to work in the proper directory and all that stuff as well. So I find it really, really tedious, but again, it just is what it is at this point. You know, let's just trust that it'll get better with time, right? We're really on the bleeding edge of tech right now, so it's a part of it. So process.env.this thing, what do I really want? So I want a CD into here, and then, and again, vibe coding, right? So tab, what's vibe coding? Vibe coding is just hitting tab in VS Code and prompts in Copilot. But yeah, let's try this again. List files, I just hit up. So list files in my current directory. We'll try that again. So it'll CD into my current directory and then run ls instead of running it in root. So it's running it from where the previous time it ran it from where VS Code was installed. All right, so it wants to run this again. I'll let it do that. These are the files and directories in your current directory. You suck. You didn't do anything. Oops. Oh, what's going on? I think I had to restart so we can get the env. That might be it. That might be it. I might have had to restart it so we can capture this context here. You're not doing it, dude. Let me look at the docs. Let's ask ChatGPT how to do this. How to set env vars in my MCP server in VS Code. Nope, you didn't get it. See guys, you're not going to be out of a job yet. It's going to take a while. env workspace directory. So I have last command args env workspace directory. And then here I say cd into process env workspace directory, which changes the directory, right? And then I run ls. But it's not working. Let me try something here. Am I missing something? That was right. Let me try stop and then start. And then Copilot once again. Not really working properly. All right, let's skip this for now. Let me see, if I say ls here, then it's good. Let's skip that for a second. Let's go back here. Await exec promise, I have a sync, I have await exec promise, cd. Let me do one more. Guys, I did not build again. That's why. I think that's why. I didn't build. npm run build. What an idiot. Let's try this again. Nope. It's not why. All right. Let's debug. Let's use the inspector and see what happens. Let me build because I added the log. Let me inspect. And let's go back to the inspector. Restart tools. Let's list tools again. List projects. List directory. Run tool. Error executing ls. cd undefined, right? Because I don't have the workspace. I can set it up here. Try again. cd undefined workspace directory. Okay, it's not getting the value from my env. Process env workspace directory. Workspace directory. See if we can figure this out. So I should have env, which we do. My command. Let me look at the TypeScript SDK again. I already had it here, but nope. This got me stumped. Why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? Let me take a look at something here. Off screen for a second. wanted to make sure that I should be using process env, and I should. So I'm looking at a previous project. That is correct. That is correct. So I'm not sure why this is failing here. cd process env workspace directory process dot env. Ooh, but I have a typo here, which shouldn't affect it. Console error executing ls command in workspace directory. Let's build again and inspect again. And restart again. Make sure the variable's here. Workspace directory. Okay. Don't know what happened. I don't know. I think it was a typo. I think it's because I had those two backticks. Doesn't really make sense. Not sure if that was it or not, but we can see that I was able to get the process env here this time. So this is the directory that we're working in. Cool. Sorry for all that, guys. Let's see if we can keep it moving. All right, so I mentioned that I want to use the less tool. Let me show you guys what that looks like. Do take a look. I would appreciate your support on this. Less allows you to create your cloud infrastructure, in this case AWS infrastructure, just based on your file system. So if I'm working on a project and I have a less folder inside of it, then in this case I can create an APIs folder, and then I have an API, a REST API named demo, and then I have a /hello route, and then I have a GET request, right? And there is a less CLI that allows you to create these resources a little bit easier. So if I were to touch this inside of my current directory and add this to it, I can run my server and deploy, right? So let's do this. So inside of less MCP, I have this list directory. We see that this is working, right? So I'm going to keep this line for the exec. Or actually, I think it might be easier if I just get rid of this one and say list projects, list my less projects, yes. Executing, okay, so let me get rid of that. I can get rid of that. And then CD, and let me show you guys this in the terminal. So I can say less CLI, help. Or you can say npx shuva.io /less CLI help, in your case where you guys don't have it installed, right? So what I want to use in this case is I want to create a new resource. I want to create a REST API route. So I can say, where's create? So let's CLI create, right? So instead of just help, I'll do create help. So what can I create? I can create routes, I can create sockets, I can create topics, subscribers, cron jobs, shared modules, cloud functions, etc. So what does creating a route look like? Okay, so this creates HTTP routes, the required options for options marked as required. If you do not specify them, interactive mode will ask you for them. In this case, everything is required. So I need to specify the name, the path, the language, and the verb, right? So if we look back at the docs, we're creating an API, right? The name is demo, the path is hello, the verb is get, and the language is JavaScript, right? So we have Node.js, Python, and we also support TypeScript. So let's see if we can vibe code this. So I'll copy that, go back to my agent, and I'll say update my list projects command or tool to use the to run the CLI command below. Use Zod for the schema. Let's see if it can do this. Checking the existing code in index.ts, checking package.json for dependencies. Now it has a good understanding of the setup. I'll update list projects. Tool to create a new tool called create route that uses the less CLI command with Zod for schema validation. Cool. What did I say? I asked it to update my list projects tool. Yeah, that's not what I actually wanted, but whatever. It's smart enough to figure it out. Okay, you're taking a while. There we go. All right. Nice. Updating index.ts, so we did that. Adding Zod schemas. I see the issue now. MCP registration expects a Zod raw shape. Z object. Yeah. Yes. All right. So it's using the Z object, but it should have just provided it directly. So I think it was able to figure that out. There we go. So we see it had a Z object on line 20, but it flattened it, and it just provides each of the parameters directly. Now let's build a project, make sure everything works. Don't worry about that. I'll keep the changes. Again, because I'm not using Git, I don't really know what it changed. But so create route schema, list projects tool. Oh, this is a really cool tool, so check this out. So it was able to CD into my current directory. And then, I don't know how it found this command, to be honest with you. But it's correct. It is correct. In this case, it doesn't matter what directory we're in, so I can get rid of that for this one. Text, SCD out, SCD error, and then catch, error executing. Well, we probably don't even need the catch, but that's fine. We'll leave that there. So list project, list my list projects, that should work. And then create route, create a new HTTP route for a less API. So it was able to figure that out based on what I had pasted in the prompt. Create route schema is this guy up here. So I would have put it under this tool. Let me make sure this tool's not using. Yeah, this tool's not using it. I would have put it here, but that's fine. And then const name, path, language, verb. The verb is an enum, so get, post, put, patch, delete, and then TypeScript, JavaScript, and Python. And then why does it want to update this? Oh, so because I deleted the CD up top, it thinks that I want to do that down here. I do not, so I can just escape. So I want to CD into the current directory and then run npx true.io, less CLI, create route, the name is name, the P is the path, L for the language, V for the verb. Cool. Text, blah, 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 error creating route. Okay, cool. All right. So let me stop instead of restart, let me just stop and start myself. All right, so it's running. Let's check it out here, and let me open my path. I mean my inspector. And let me make sure that it sees the tools. It does not. Something's funky here. Something's weird here. Let me stop. So like Windsurf has like a reload button right here, but this doesn't. There used to be a reload button up here, I think, but it's not here anymore. So I have list directories and list projects, although it should be create route. I'm not sure why that is. I think that's why it was giving us errors before as well. See? This is weird. Let me stop. Oh, I didn't start it, that's why. Or did it crash? Nope. Nope. Ooh, guess what? I didn't build. Yeah, I think it's like, if I had more time, I'd be creating, like setting up NodeMon and all that stuff, because this is annoying. All right, and then let's start one more time. So now we should be good. Yes, list projects, create route. Okay, cool. So, create a API, create a route for an API named demo. Let me see. Create a get/hello. Put that in quotes because the slash is you can use that for tools as well. Create a get hello route for an API named demo in JavaScript. Let's see how this goes. Cool. So this is what it wants. These are the parameters. So based on the schema, these are the parameters. So name, path, language, verb. That looks correct to me. So let's let it run. And it should run that in the current directory. So we'll see that it created a less folder. It created my APIs. I have an API named demo, and then I have a /hello route. And then I have my get.js, response body hello world, return response. Let's say hello from MCP. Okay. Is it done? Yes, it's done. And so now, and I think we'll end it here, guys. But now I can say let's CLI build, and I'll say MCP. Let's say MCP demo. Let's CLI build MCP demo. MCLI build MCP demo, and then run MCP demo. No, require is not defined in ES module. Yeah, this file is being treated as an ES module because that's JS. I didn't want to do it from here. I wanted to do it from here. That's because of the package JSON. Yeah, because I didn't want to run it from the MCP. I really wanted to run it from here. Workspace directory, live, and I'll say less demo. So let's just do the same thing here. Is it running? Build project create. No. Start. How about now? Yes, create route. So what was my prompt? Copy it, and I'll drop it here. The reason it didn't work in the other one is just because of the way that I have my package JSON set up, so it's installing my dependencies and everything. And then I have the type set to module, so it's just incorrect. So let me run it one more time. Cool. Created my less project here. I don't have a package JSON, but that's fine. Less doesn't need it to run. I would love if you guys did check it out, but this is not a, beyond the scope of what we were doing here. But one more time, so I'll say less CLI build MCP demo, less CLI run MCP demo, and then it's running at localhost. Wrong window, but let me go back here. So localhost 3333, which is incorrect because the route is actually hello world. Yeah, and so we had changed it to hello from MCP. So hello from MCP, and then let's build and run one more time, and then reload and hello from MCP. Right. So I had promised that we would be deploying this to production. I do still have to finish building the CLI tool, so I think I'll kind of end the stream here, guys. I appreciate you joining. I am looking at the chat right now. If you guys do have any questions, do let me know. But yeah, that's MCP in a nutshell. And then one other thing I'll show you guys, actually, instead of inferring it, instead of letting the LLM infer it, when I was writing out the, that I wanted to create the /hello, we noticed that was highlighted. So actually, if you say slash, is it slash? No, it's not slash, it's hash. So I don't know what slash does actually, but here it'll give me my different commands. So instead of the agent having to figure out what command I intended on using, it will, here I'm being just very specific. So I can just say like create route. So let me say, I'm in the less MCP. Let me go back to the demo one. Let me kill that. And then here I'll just say hash create routes, and then I'll just say get slash, let's say users, or post. Say we want to create a new user, so post to users, and we'll use create route post users in Python. There we go. All right, so now it kind of gets it. I don't know why. I guess it made the decision for me. Am I still in the same context window? Yeah, so it wants to use, what happened? What did I do? Oh, I lost it. It wants to use demo as the API. Let me run it one more time so you can see. Oh, so now it changed it. Yeah. So now the name of the REST API would be the user's API, which is not what I want. I wanted it to be the demo API. So I said I was going to jump off here, but let me show you guys something really cool. Really, really, really cool. So you can add context here. Before they had agent mode, so everything was like in ask mode, and the way that I would work is before I did anything, so right now the current file is get.js. It did not have access to my entire workspace before. It only had access to what you gave it access to based on the context. So the current file is get.js, so it's able to see that. However, anything else that I wanted it to be able to do, I had to give it like different files and different whatever images, or you name it. So a huge improvement. I've been using agent mode in VS Code for, I don't know, I want to say like 3 weeks. I was using the preview version before it got rolled out to everyone. I think it's been like 3 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks or so. But now in agent mode, it has access to my entire workspace, which is cool. So instead of like every time I wanted to do something different, having to go back in here, pick all the files and give it all the context, but imagine I have a file that is importing a bunch of stuff, and so the documentation is in, the JS docs is in whatever it's importing. It doesn't know how to use the interface because it doesn't have access to it. So you have to it was just really tedious bringing everything in. Agent mode cuts that out. But something that I see here as an issue is, and why did this? So we saw a minute ago the name of the API wanted to be like users API or something like that. So I think because I switched back and forth, it changed it. Yeah, so here, users API, right? So that's not what I want. Let me make sure that that didn't run. Yeah, that didn't run. I still have just demo, right? So what I want it to do is, I already have demo. I don't want to have a bunch of REST APIs, even though less allows you to have as many REST APIs as I want, but I want to have one base URL, right? So I want to create a post users, but I want it to be in the same demo folder, and I don't want to have to say that every time. And you know, I'm using JavaScript in this case. The reason I use JavaScript in this case is just so I don't have to compile the TypeScript into JavaScript. But I don't want to have to tell you the language all the time either. It gets annoying, and I think you should be smart enough to infer it. I think it would be able to infer the .js probably, because this project is predominantly JavaScript, predominantly it's one file, but it doesn't know what REST API should be named, right? So super cool. GitHub is a folder, and then Copilot, I think it's underscore, or is it like this? Instructions.md. This is a markdown file. So now here I can say, working with less. This is like a README that you would give your new, you know, you'd have in your project for your onboarding and things like that. So working with less. When creating new REST API routes, use the existing demo API. I'll be a little bit more specific. So in less APIs. All right. And then I'll also say use JS for all new resources. All right. And then let me go into my settings. So I'll go to the actual settings instead of the JSON version. And then here I'll say Copilot. No. Copilot. And then here, you'll want, I don't know if this is checked by default, but controls whether code instructions from GitHub Copilot instructions are added to Copilot requests. Note, keep your instructions short and precise. We've gone over that already. Poor instruction can degrade Copilot's quality and performance. Okay, so there, we've done that, right? So add this to your source, and then everybody on your team, if you're working on a team, can use that. So let me go back to my prompt, and let me start over just to have a clean context window, and I'll say, you know, we can be specific about the command or not, but let me just say, create a post users, I guess it wants to quote there, okay. Create a post users routes. So the name is demo, the path is users, and the language is JavaScript. The verb is post, right? So it was able to figure this out, and it was also able to figure this out. And again, this is where, like, I feel like, you know, more senior engineers are talking shit because the LLM can't figure certain things out and blah, 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 blah. Well, you have to give it context. So the way that I use this in practice is that, oh, that's really cool. I didn't expect all that. The way that I use this is that, you know, for each of my projects, like if I have a React project, I'll say, like, you know, these are the naming conventions. I don't know, use Zod for schema validations, and you know, whatever. Refactor files that are over 200 lines of code. and things of that nature. So having all of that inside of my Copilot instructions makes it a lot faster and easier for me to get things done, because I don't have to give it context all the time and expect it to just do things, like either do things its own way or read my mind. So having those prompts is very helpful. So yeah, so it actually did a lot more. And this is where you really see the benefit of it, right? So I use less for all of my APIs, but look at what it did. The basic implementation is this. So if I just use a CLI tool, this is what I would have gotten. But what the LLM did is it understood that it's a post request, so it's extracting the user data from the body. If the user data has a user, if there's no username, then it's username is required. And then it creates a new user, and then it has status code in the body, and blah 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 blah. So I could have also put in the prompt like validate routes using Zod. Let me add that. So request bodies using Zod. And then I can probably say update my request validation for post users. Oh, I spelt it wrong, but the LLM is smart. It'll figure it out. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I don't have Zod installed in this project, but you get it. You get it. Bye guys. Thanks for joining once again. If you have any questions, any suggestions, this is my first time ever doing a live. I don't know how long we've been here, but it did go longer than I had expected and planned for. If you guys want to see more of these, let me know. If you have any suggestions for other topics, let me know. Subscribe, like, share, have fun with your MCP. If you build something, feel free to share it with me. I'd love to take it for a spin. If you need any help or support with setting anything up, just get in touch with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever the case may be. Leave a comment. Noon. All you need is context. All you need is context. I think it's pretty magical. So yeah, thanks again for joining. Marcus, thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking around to the end, guys. I really, really do appreciate it. And yeah, let's call it a day. Take care, guys. I don't know how to turn off the stream, but I'll stop it eventually.